But I think it is imperative that we do address the fact that China is not messing around here. China is 1,000% behind Iran, and obviously it's primarily for economic purposes.
Yes, it's for economic purposes, but I would also suggest that the world is just sick of us. They're sick of us. A majority of what we do in terms of our interference all around the world is because of trying to combat China, this sort of like economic Cold War that we're having, this new Cold War with China. And we've already lost it. So every other attempt just is desperate and it isn't working. And China knows it. It's that, don't interrupt your enemy when he's, sinking himself. So they don't, they're just watching us implode. But at the end of the day, they're also going to have their Taiwan problem solved.
China has warned Israel that they will do what they will do if Israel nukes Iran. The fact that we're even having this conversation about what if Israel nukes Iran, like the fact that that's even discussed has shown just
they'll be annihilated. If Israel drops a nuclear weapon anywhere, they're done. Because it'll be either China or Russia or both, and that'll be that.
The collapse of the U.S. empire was never going to come as a result of the firing of a shot. That's not what's going to do it. What's going to do it is what every other empire in history has always succumbed to, and that is the debasement of their currency, because the banking system is what controls the world. Now, the only reason the United States hasn't completely fallen yet is because the Zio state has not fallen yet. But as Jen often likes to say, we are one and the same. When one goes, the other will almost certainly go, especially if we go first, and Israel obviously will go. If Israel does go, which we do think is going to happen, it's a question of when, not if, it'll be dependent upon how much damage is actually done as they are ushered out the door. Now, many of you have seen Chinese Prime Minister, many others have all issued statements today. Do not fuck with the Strait of Hormuz. Stop thinking that we're playing here. This is not a game. Well, one would say, is China prepared to enter a world war with the United States from a military standpoint? I would say that if push came to shove that they would, but that's not the angle that they're going for. The angle that they're going for is this, which is, again, the angle that very few people are talking about. In Strait of Hormuz, Iran and China take aim at U.S. dollar hegemony.
Well, this has always been the way. I mean, we started talking about this a few years ago. The end of empire is going to be economic. It's not going to be that they're going to destroy us in terms of military might. They don't need to. We think we could bomb our way out of everything, and it doesn't work. No. And Russia's made a fortune on oil since this whole thing started. So they're laughing all the way to the bank.
As the U.S.-Israel war on Iran paused for 2 weeks on Wednesday amid fresh diplomatic talks, has roiled the global economy for more than a month, Iran and China have seized the opportunity to address a sharp gripe about the global financial system. Their common cause, ending the hegemony of the U.S. dollar. For years, they say, Washington has leveraged the dominance of the dollar in international trade to exert influence and inflict pain on enemies and competitors, Iran and China included. The supremacy of the dollar is especially apparent in the global oil market. Again, petrodollar, where about 80% of transactions are settled in the currency, according to a 2023 estimate by JP Morgan Chase. In Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz, a conduit from the Gulf for about 1/5 of the global oil and liquefied natural gas supply, Tehran and Beijing have found a tool to boost keep going, Colin. The Chinese yuan is an alternative to the greenback. Under Iranian officials' de facto toll booth regime, commercial vessels are being charged transit fees in the yuan. According to multiple reports, the latest example of deepening Chinese-Iranian economic cooperation facilitated by China's currency. While it is unclear how many vessels have made payments in the yuan, at least 2 had done so as of March 25th, according to Lloyd's List. China's Ministry of Commerce last week acknowledged that Lloyd's List reporting in a social media post that appeared to confirm the use of yuan to settle payments. On Saturday, Iran's embassy in Zimbabwe said in a social media post that it was time to add the petroyuan to the global oil market. That's a big
Oh,
deal.
that had to piss off some people.
Yeah. Chevron, BP, ExxonMobil.
Oh,
That's how it goes, guys.
I
I
think
feel
it's yuan. I think it's yuan. If you guys know, I think it might be a two-syllable.
it might be
Uh,
yuan. I think you might be right about that.
I
Uh, yeah, no, I think you might be right. I apologize.
no, I just never. I know I'm a gringa.
Aren't we all? Tehran,
Yeah,
which
you
on
ain't.
Wednesday said it would guarantee safe passage in the Strait for 2 weeks under a ceasefire deal reached with the U.S. Again, what does ceasefire deal mean anyway? And Beijing did not respond to requests for comment. At one level, Iran is aiming to poke its thumb in the U.S. eye. Of course they are, adding insult to injury. Kenneth Rogoff, an economics professor at Harvard, and former chief economist at the IMF, sure. At another level, Iran is dead serious on preferring the yuan to avoid U.S. sanctions to cultivate its ally China, which has been moving steadily to denominate its own trade, and that of the BRICS nations into the yuan. And that is the new global currency. That's essentially what's going to happen.
I'm so here for it.
Colin, please.
I am so here for it.
For Tehran and Beijing, elevating the yuan is a win-win. The use of the currency allows China and Iran to skirt U.S. sanctions imposed via the dollar-dominated financial system. As you said, Trump was going to accelerate the revolution and the sanctions, or the tariffs, if you will, both ways that we're going to do so. The thing about the rich, ladies and gentlemen, especially the managerial class, the finance class, if you will, the thing about them, first of all, they don't create anything, so it's inevitable that they would fall apart. But the problem is that they have always been convinced that they would not be the last ones holding the bag. What they don't understand is that people are not going to be buying U.S. Treasury notes anymore. And the people that think that what they have is worth a lot of money, it's not. And when you have certain types of assets, even in real estate, that are not going to be worth shit anymore, like office buildings, look at what's happening to Vegas. Vegas is just one example, but this is going to happen everywhere. It's going to be a completely devastated country. And of course, the working class will suffer the most, as they always do. But the rich are probably not going to be able to find their way out of it. And what you're ultimately going to see, and why the America First movement is the movement that will dominate politics going forward, these sons of bitches that have all the money, they're going to leave this country and go somewhere else. So when they literally came here, fucked you dirty, and then left without paying the bill, that's what's happening. Now, the question is, are we going to let them leave without having to pay the piper?
I don't think we have any control over that.
Maybe.
I
maybe
think
not.
that the people that are going to get away with it are going to get away with it. And that's just the way it's going to be. And that's why when people ask, like, what do we need to do? Start learning how to be more independent of our infrastructure and less dependent on our supply chain.
Live off the land.
Less dependent on, well, I mean, there's not going to be some solution other than community building, mutual aid, smaller sustainable communities. That is the only way out. And it's just nobody really wants to hear that. But yeah, I mean, mostly this is going to be the wealthy people don't care if international trade is in US dollars or in Chinese yuan. They don't care. They're invested either way, right? Like that's the thing. Like I've always said this, I do not care what language the oligarch speaks. It's irrelevant to me who owns this. The fact that we're owned is the problem. So,
guys, we're getting heavily suppressed this evening, if you haven't noticed already. So make sure you smash that like button if you haven't already, and share the stream if you can. It also simplifies and reduces the cost of trade between the sides, which has boomed under a 25-year strategic partnership signed in 2021. Iran clearly understands the importance of this challenge to U.S. financial dominance, as well as the vital role of the dollar system and petrodollars. Bulan Gokay, a professor of international relations at Keele University in the UK. For China, Gokay said, the move aligns with Beijing's aims of creating a multipolar financial world where the US dollar's central role is counterbalanced by the growing influence of emerging powers. China buys more than 80% of Iran's oil exports, enjoying discounted rates and purchases widely believed to be facilitated in yuan. Iran, in turn, imports large quantities of Chinese machinery, electronic equipment, chemicals, and industrial components. Oh, those damn raggedy Islamists out there in the West Asia. What the hell do they know how to use any of these products? They're so primitive, so behind the times.
Yeah.
The war has done little to disrupt oil flows between the two countries, which remain similar to pre-conflict levels, according to analyses by data and analytical firms. In the first 2 weeks of the conflict, Iran exported 12 million to 13.7 million barrels of crude, most of it to China, according to Kepler and tanker trackers. China has long harbored ambitions of challenging the primacy of the dollar. Obviously, that's why we're totally at war with China. In a speech to officials in 2024, Chinese President Xi Jinping expressed his hope that the yuan would become a common currency in international commerce and achieve global reserve currency status. And there it is. There he is. Global reserve currency status. That is the end of the US domination right there. We were always wondering which country would look to supersede the United States in terms of currency currency hegemony around the world. It is obvious that China has been fortifying its positions for not decades, for generations. This has probably been going on ever since Mao took over, but it would definitely seem that China has significantly evolved from the 25-year reign that was hell on earth, that was Mao Zedong. So here we are today in a country that is emerging, and we're falling. And we are doing everything, and I mean everything, to help them take over.
Well, I am. Yes. I think it's time for somebody else to have a chance. You know, if we were doing a real bang up job, maybe I'd have some reservations. And I want to say something about this whole concept of the dollar and the global dollar hegemony and how now we're going to lose it or whatever. The reason that's happening is because pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. Okay. See, we had that. We had the whole thing. We had a thriving economy. And you know what? China and other countries like Iran wanted to work with us and deal with us. Venezuela wanted to just work with us. But no, that wasn't enough. So you had to keep flying higher and higher to the sun, just like Ziohel. And now it's over because you could have, this is the exact point, is that the greed knows no bounds. We could have had dollar hegemony, but no, we had to go around and put sanctions on 60 something countries that cripples them instead of just being nice and trading with people. So now we're going to lose everything. And I honestly, it feels really poetically just.
The yuan has made steady inroads in recent years amid the growing influence of global South economies, many of which have strained relations with Washington. But the Chinese currency still has a steep mountain to climb if it is to pose a serious challenge to the greenback. Unlike the dollar, the yuan is not freely convertible due to Beijing's strict capital controls, meaning that businesses and institutions cannot exchange it for other currencies or move it across borders at will. This is the difference between capitalism and communism. And so
they protect their society. They protect and also their people get to determine how their money is spent in terms of collectively.
In the way that we could never have here in the States.
So that's why they prioritize things like transit, infrastructure, things that actually make regular people's lives better because they have to. That's just that's how they determine how their money is spent. And yet they're an authoritarian state.
When a very conservative business partner of mine who had very big reservations about going to China and going to Beijing. He came back and he said it is insane how far ahead that country is from us in terms of infrastructure.
Yeah.
So whose
And
fault
not
is it?
only are they so far ahead of us, but this is what is so pathetic on our part. And I know this from a friend of mine who started doing business with the Chinese back in the 70s and was one of like the only business people over there doing stuff and saw the growth, right? So they're not just ahead of us. They've lapped us
Yeah.
twice at least. So the point isn't that they're ahead. The point is that they came from so far behind, and now because of how we prioritize things and what we chose to spend our resources doing, they're so far ahead. Like, it's over.
This is also a question that I would ask, depending on who we are able to speak with on the Hill. I would say, if we're really concerned about China, which is obviously the top global priority, when you really get down to it, China is that is our competition. And so the fact that China has at least 5,000 plus miles of high-speed rail and we have none. Like, do you not understand how significant that is for countrywide commerce in China?
It's massive. And I'll tell you where I'm living now, when I go up to Chattanooga, the intersection of highways, interstates in Chattanooga, there's an intersection of 3 different highways at Chattanooga, 3 different interstates. And the amount of trucking. It used to be, I remember, you would see, you'd see trucking, but you would also see a lot of just like pedestrian cars, vehicles, regular people, whatever. Now, I would say it's 85% trucking. So our infrastructure, our supply chain is so heavily dependent on fossil fuel, on diesel, on stuff that we don't produce for ourselves.
It's archaic now.
And yet every other of these countries that we're supposedly competing against have actually been working towards bettering their own infrastructure and their supply chain. China probably, and again, I am not an expert on Chinese infrastructure, but I strongly doubt that it heavily relies on trucking as their primary means of supply chain.
Yeah,
so I mean, we're just at such a disadvantage.
It's also something to be said for people that have been brought up in a certain level of not. Well, I mean, lack of education is definitely a part of it. There's a reason why people kind of like latch on to one thing and they make it their entire life and their entire identity. They don't evolve. They don't want to evolve. They don't know how to evolve. So, I'm going to drive a truck for my entire life. Well, maybe you don't have to. Maybe there's other ways to do it. We also live in a country where we don't want to better our people. There is something to be said for when the monopolization of everything became figured out. We're seeing it now with AI, and you've seen it for generations. A handful of people get the goods. They use the crooked courts and the legal and legislative system to basically break all forms of competition. Anybody in this country who claims to be for capitalism, and I'm talking about real capitalism, if you think that this system is worth saving, or you defend this system, or also don't understand why millions of people in this country want socialism, then you're just a moron. Like, I have no sympathy whatsoever.
I also don't understand. I don't understand, like, when you were even saying before, like, China's our main competitor. Why are we competing with anybody? Have we ever thought about that for a second? And this is something where, and as I'm telling, I'm not a competitive person. I don't play, I don't do team sports. I've never been into that because I am never going to care as much.
You're a Dolphin.
And I would not want people to depend on me for stuff. But, why are we competing with them?
Because
why don't we do stuff that we're good at and let them do stuff they're good at? And why don't we just, I don't know, interact with them and trade?
It's human nature. We are so far behind. This is exactly why I keep bringing up the fact that as much as people like to blame Reagan, the fact is that I'm the person that fucked this country 9 ways to Sunday. I cannot even begin to tell you how far back this country got set. Not just by NAFTA, not just by normal trade relations with China. Glass-Steagall was the final nail in the coffin, but the Telecom Act, even the crime bill, everything.
I just don't understand it. And for people saying everything is a competition, okay, but then let's explain how countries like China don't go around the world bullying people and trying to beat them, but rather goes around trying to work with people and trade with people and build coalition with people.
Again, I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing.
No, I'm saying, I'm talking to people in chat, like, where it's about, it isn't about, we don't need to be competing with anybody. We need to be taking care of our own people. The problem is everybody's looking at this like our country is a corporation and we're competing for, like, you know, the best branding.
Correct.
Instead, but it isn't. That's the problem.
I didn't say
this
that
isn't a corporation, and people we need to be taking care of our people.
Jen, again, we say it before, we will say it again. Do you see the name of this channel? This is not a joke. The only way that anything is changing is through a revolution. The people that control the levers of power have shown us time and again that they will not change no matter what. You will have to literally rip it from their cold, dead hands, and that's it.
No, I am not talking about
Jen, let's not get this. Jen, we got a long show.
Start talking to me that way. Stop it. You're not the boss of me. I'm talking about collective action, collectivism, working together because it's a class war. That's what I'm talking about.
The Chinese government's control over financial institutions, including the central bank, has further hampered adoption as it cements perceptions that China's markets lack transparency or a predictable regulatory footing. While the proportion of central banks' foreign exchange reserves held in dollars has been in steady decline for decades, the U.S. currency is still by far the dominant reserve and currency global. How much longer is this, Colin? All right, it looks like it's got quite a bit, but I'm going to try to skim through this. No, scroll down. Let's stop there. Stop there. Even if China struggles to match the internationalization of the dollar, it may not matter much to Tehran, said Hosik Lee Makiyama, director of the European Center for International Policy Economy in Brussels. China purchases nearly all of Iran's oil, and their trade is actually in balance since Iran can get all the machinery and industrial goods that it cannot get elsewhere. Europe's and Japan's currencies could not displace the dollar in the past because neither power could supply oil-producing countries with all their import needs. That's key. Keep going. But China, he said, is perhaps the closest the world has seen to a manufacturing one-stop shop as the biggest manufacturer globally by far. Dan Steinbach, the founder of the consultancy Difference Group, said that while the supremacy of the US dollar would not change in the short term, the growing use of the yuan could chip away, has chipped away at US dominance in specific sectors over time. Overall, it is a question of gradual erosion rather than an abrupt substitution. Rogoff, the Harvard economist, said, much would depend on the end game of the war and ensuing fallout in the coming years. This war is not ending in any way, shape, or form that benefits the United States.
No, it's just going to continue. I mean, I think we get the gist of this. I mean, it's just going to continually benefit the nations that are sick and tired of our shit.